Hi, good morning everyone. In this presentation today, I'll talk to you about the role of iron in the ocean and its implication for marine biochemistry. So the focus would be on understanding how iron transported to the atmosphere and become bioavailable and influences ocean productivity. So what is so unique about iron? Uh, we know that iron is a very important trace element for all life, and marine life is also often an exception. So, although this iron is very common, it is one of the two to three most abundant elements on Earth, and yet paradoxically, it sometimes falls short of biological demand. And that has to do with the fact that the environment of Earth today contains about 20% of oxygen in the atmosphere. And under these conditions, iron exists in a form that is relatively not available to the biology. If it exists as a iron mineral and iron oxides, that is not readily available, biologically available. So in the ocean, the discrepancy between the biological demand and iron supply is very extreme, and that makes iron an important player in a lot of ecological processes in the ocean. And also, we can get into the large scale ecological and global issues, such as the role of iron in enhancing the biological pump of phytoplanktons. And these phytoplanktons are the single celled algae and plants that live in the surface of the ocean. And they are an important thing for atmospheric carbon dioxide. So, they actually serve to take carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere and sequester in the ocean. And this process is called the biological pump, which is shown here in more of a schematic fashion. Plankton, through photosynthesis, take carbon dioxide out of the surface ocean, where it is in equilibrium with the atmospheric carbon dioxide, and they convert it into their own biomass, or also called the organic carbon. And some of this material sinks out of the surface ocean and into the deep ocean. So, by removing carbon dioxide from the water, carbon dioxide is drawn from the atmosphere, and the CO2 that is converted into the organic carbon sinks down into the deep ocean, which is very significant. So, there is a lot of interest in what are the factors that control the distribution and growth of the phytoplanktons in the surface waters. So, what is the main idea? The idea is that primary production and phytoplankton biomass are not same everywhere in the ocean. And if we look at the distribution of phytoplankton biomass in the surface ocean, this is a 3-year average of phytoplankton biomass as represented by chlorophyll concentration, and which is determined by satellite. So on this scale, the cooler colors, the purple and the dark blue, correspond to very low chlorophyll concentrations or low biomass, and the warmer colors are regions of higher concentrations, higher biomass. So what we see is that in open ocean, the center of the ocean gyres, we have fairly low phytoplankton biomass, and the highest level of biomass are centered around the coast. So in general, phytoplankton distributions correspond with the distributions of the nutrients that they use for the growth. And phytoplanktons are not that different in terms of the needs from the plants in our garden. They need nitrate, they need phosphate. And so these are usually the nutrients that we can think of in terms of what controls phytoplankton growth. But if we look at the distribution of some of these nutrients in the world ocean, we actually see that there is some discrepancy between the nutrient concentration and the distribution of phytoplankton biomass. So, this is a map of the average concentration of nitrate, an important phytoplankton nutrient in the surface ocean. And again, the cooler colors correspond to the low concentrations of nitrate, and whereas the red and pink colors are very high concentration of nitrate. So you can see right away that there are significant areas with really pretty high concentration of nitrate. And looking here at the southern oceans around the Antarctica or the high North Pacific or the subarctic Pacific, and there is also a region of higher concentration around the equatorial Pacific as well. And if we look back at the phytoplankton biomass, we can see that it doesn't really exactly correspond to the distribution of nitrate. There is somewhat higher biomass in these areas, but given especially exceedingly high concentration of nitrate in the southern oceans, we might expect to see very high levels of phytoplankton biomass in this area if it is just a simple matter of correlation with nitrate concentration. So this discrepancy was a matter of dispute and debate for a number of years in the oceanographic community. So we see in the regions of high nutrient, the phytoplankton growth is limited. And it is not because of limitation of major nutrients, but it is because of the scarcity of iron availability. And even small changes in iron supply can significantly impact the ocean productivity. So the main source of atmospheric iron is mineral dust from the deserts, and these are the major deserts that supply iron-bearing dust into the atmosphere, which ultimately gets deposited into the ocean. And at the same time, overtilling soils leads to more rapid, what it is called the desertification of the soils. In other words, it loses its organic matter-rich humus layer or topsoil, and this loss of humus layer leads to a more rapid conversion of that soil into essentially just dirt that is not fertile at all. And this dirt, because it is not compacted together with that really organic matter-rich layer, it is just loose. And this really loose dirt leads to dust because wind can just blow across it and carry it through the atmosphere. And when we have an increase in dust, we get an increase of dust transport to the ocean. And this dust transport can fertilize things. The reason is because dust contains nutrients like iron that we talked about earlier, which is essential for primary producers and photosynthesizing organisms. However, not all the irons that is deposited into the ocean is usable. In the dust, iron exists in the form of iron oxides or with an oxidation state of plus 3, which is insoluble and it is not biologically available to the phytoplanktons. And for that to happen, iron should have an oxidation state of plus 2, which is soluble and it is bioavailable. So the key factors or the parameters that we look for is called the fractional solubility, which determines how much iron is bioavailable, and which is defined as the fraction of total iron that is getting dissolved into the seawater. So in my research, I tried to look at different mechanisms of how does insoluble iron become soluble during the atmospheric transport. So there are different mechanisms that control the iron solubility, and one of the major, most important mechanism is acid-driven dissolution. So as dust travels, it mixes with the polluted air containing gases like sulfur dioxide and hydrogen oxides. And these gases forms acids like sulfuric acid and nitric acids, which are very strong acids. And these acids attack mineral surfaces and release iron into the soluble form. So initially, this contains alkaline materials like calcium carbonate, which neutralize acid. But once this buffering capacity is exhausted, this rapid iron dissolution begins. However, there are observations even in remote marine regions where pollution is low, iron solubility can still be higher. So this indicates this acid processing alone cannot explain everything. Then we have another important mechanism is ligand promoted dissolution. Organic compounds like oxalate found from the oxidation of volatile organic compounds bind strongly with the Fe3 plus. In acidic conditions, this forms stable Fe oxalate complexes. So these complexes prevent reprecipitation and continuously extract iron from the particles. And under the sunlight, they undergo photo reduction, which converts Fe3 plus to Fe2 plus, which is more soluble. Then recent studies show that marine sources also can contribute. Compounds like dimethyl sulfide released from the ocean biology can form sulfur-containing species. These species enhances photochemical detection of iron, especially in coastal upwelling regions. So the ocean itself influences iron solubility in the atmosphere. Also, as dust ages, its mineral structures begins to change. Crystalline minerals transform into amorphous or nanophase ions, form like ferrihydrite. These forms are much more soluble, so aging increases iron bioavailability. Cloud processing is in another chemical reactor. Dust particles enter the cloud droplets and experience variable pH and oxidants like hydrogen peroxide. When droplets evaporate, iron may remain dissolved or reprecipitate into the more soluble phases. This overall enhances the solubility. And lastly, we have role of particle size. So particle size is another critical factor. Quartz particles, although they have larger grain size, but they have a low surface area. Because of that, they have very low interaction with the chemicals, which leads to low solubility. But on the other hand, fine particles, because of their high surface area, their interaction is much more significant than the coarse particles, which leads to high solubility. So fine particles act as a mini chemical reactors. So despite this understanding, there are still gaps. A limited observation in many ocean regions, uncertainty in role of marine organics, and there is also a need to quantify the combined effects of these multiple processes. So my study focuses on the Aben Sea, which is a unique laboratory Wind is influenced by the continental emissions from the South Asia, influenced by the desert dust from the Thar and Oman regions, and also it is very much influenced by the strong monsoonal winds. Like during winters, air masses come from the continental masses with very high anthropogenic influences, and during summer, marine air dominates. So cleaner atmospheric conditions. So this seasonal contrast also allows us to study the different processing pathways. So the objective of my study is to quantify atmospheric iron and identify the key drivers controlling its solubility in this region.